day started like any other hike. I followed a trail that promised breathtaking views, surrounded by towering trees and the distant murmur of a hidden stream. But as the sun began its descent, a prickling sensation crawled up my spine, a subtle awareness that I was no longer alone. I dismissed it initially, attributing it to the solitude of the woods. However, the rustling leaves behind me persisted, growing louder and more distinct. A glance over my shoulder revealed nothing but the shadows of the forest. Unease settled in, but I pressed on, hoping to outrun my imagination. As darkness draped the landscape, the sounds intensified. Footsteps, deliberate and echoing, were now unmistakable. Panic gnawed at the edges of my composure. Someone was following me, stalking me through the wilderness. My heart pounded in my chest, each step an eerie echo of my pursuer. With every twist and turn, the hunter stayed just out of sight, a phantom in pursuit. Desperation set in, and the only logical option seemed to be to find refuge. That's when I stumbled upon it, a dilapidated cabin nestled in a clearing. It stood as a sanctuary against the encroaching night. I slipped inside, the creaking door protesting my intrusion. The air within was thick with dust, and the feeble light that filtered through the cracks revealed a space frozen in time. Abandoned, yet eerily intact. The illusion of safety settled over me momentarily, a brief respite from the relentless pursuit outside. Scanning the interior, I saw a rusty radio on a worn-out table. Hope flickered. Maybe I could call for help. My hands fumbled with the dials, the crackling static a disheartening response. I cursed under my breath, realizing that my only lifeline to the outside world was as unreliable as the dilapidated structure around me. As I strained to fix the radio, the sound of footsteps drew near, now amplified in the confined space. Panic set in, and I surveyed the cabin for anything that could be used as a barricade. A heavy wooden plank caught my eye. With trembling hands, I secured it across the door, praying it would hold against the impending threat. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, but the reality of the situation gripped me. Out there, in the impenetrable darkness, was someone intent on doing me harm. The isolated cabin, once a refuge, now felt like a prison. My breath hitched as the realization sank in. The hunter was closing in. I returned to the radio, desperately trying to establish a connection. Static filled the airwaves, punctuated by unsettling whispers that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if the forest itself was conspiring against me. The footsteps outside ceased, replaced by an ominous silence. I strained to hear anything beyond the stifling stillness. Seconds turned into agonizing minutes, each passing moment heightening the sense of dread. A low creak shattered the silence, the cabin door strained against the barricade. My heart pounded in my ears as I stared at the makeshift barrier, praying it would hold. The tension in the air was palpable, and my every instinct screamed for survival. A resounding thud echoed through the cabin as the hunter assaulted the door. I backed away, my eyes fixed on the entrance, my mind racing for a solution. The realization struck I had to fight back. Searching the dimly lit room, my hands settled on an old fireplace poker. It felt reassuring in my grip, a feeble attempt to level the playing field. The door shuddered again under the relentless assault, and I steeled myself for the confrontation that awaited. The final blow came, the door splintering under the force. The hunter stood revealed, a faceless silhouette in the doorway. Fear and determination clashed in the brief exchange of glances. With a primal roar, I lunged forward, the poker a makeshift weapon against the encroaching threat. A frenzied struggle ensued, the confines of the cabin transforming into an arena of survival. Adrenaline surged through me as I fought against the unknown assailant. The struggle was primal, each of us driven by the instinct for self-preservation. In the chaos, I managed to break free, stumbling backward. The hunter, undeterred, advanced once more. With no other recourse, I swung the poker in a desperate arc, connecting with a sickening thud. The silhouette crumpled to the floor, a defeated form left in the wake of the struggle. Exhausted and shaken, I surveyed the motionless figure before me. The encounter had left me scarred, a harrowing testament to the fragility of solitude in the unforgiving embrace of nature. The cabin, once a refuge, now held the remnants of a nightmarish confrontation. I staggered back into the forest, the moonlight casting long shadows on the path ahead. The wilderness, once serene, now bore witness to the terror that unfolded within its depths. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound, held a haunting echo of the night's ordeal. I stumbled upon a clearing, the moonlight revealing a path back to civilization. The fear that had gripped me began to subside, replaced by a profound gratitude for escape. We lived in a cabin, my wife and I, nestled in the heart of the vast, imposing forest. The tranquility of our remote abode was both a blessing and a curse. Nights were serene, the only sounds being the rustling leaves and distant hoots of nocturnal creatures. But on one fateful night, that tranquility would shatter, replaced by a nightmare that would forever haunt our memories. It was the early hours when a sharp, persistent knock on the door startled us awake. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled to answer, a sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach. 3 men stood in the moonlit clearing, their faces obscured by the shadows. Their presence was menacing, a stark contrast to the calm of the surrounding woods. The leader, a towering figure with a hardened gaze, spoke with a gravelly voice. They claimed their car had broken down, stranded in the desolation of the forest. Skepticism gnawed at me, but empathy prevailed, and against my instincts, I offered assistance. Little did I know that this act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would spiral into chaos. As the men entered our cabin, their demeanor shifted. The air crackled with tension, and the once welcoming space now felt suffocating. Their eyes darted around, scrutinizing every corner as if searching for something. Fear clenched my chest, and I exchanged uneasy glances with my wife. It was then that the true nature of our guests revealed itself. One of them, silent until now, produced a knife with a sinister glint. The realization hit like a sledgehammer their intentions were far from benign. Panic surged as they herded us into the corner, their demands escalating into threats. We were prisoners in our own home, at the mercy of these unpredictable intruders. Terror etched itself into the lines of my wife's face, mirroring the fear reflected in my own eyes. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Time blurred as the night unfolded in a macabre dance of intimidation and helplessness. We were hostages to the whims of these strangers, our pleas falling on deaf ears. The leader, emboldened by his position, taunted us with cryptic messages, hinting at a hidden agenda. It was clear that their intrusion wasn't random. We were pawns in a nightmarish game. The walls of our refuge closed in, trapping us in a claustrophobic nightmare. As the hours dragged on, the men's aggression intensified. Every creak of the floorboards, every hushed whisper, amplified the terror that gripped us. A chilling realization dawned: we were at the mercy of a menace with no regard for humanity. In a desperate bid for escape, I concocted a plan. The men, momentarily distracted, allowed a brief window of opportunity. With adrenaline-fueled precision, we seized the moment and fled into the forest. The moon cast an eerie glow on our path as we navigated the labyrinth of trees, our footsteps muffled by the blanket of fallen leaves. Despite our efforts to evade the pursuers, the forest offered no refuge. The night swallowed us in a disorienting maze, our breaths ragged, and the distant sounds of pursuit closing in. Fear became our compass, guiding us through the darkness as we clung to the hope of survival. Exhausted and on the brink of despair, we stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. But our respite was short-lived. The men emerged from the shadows, their menacing silhouettes casting long shadows on the forest floor. The confrontation that followed was a desperate struggle for survival. a frenzied clash against the encroaching darkness. Despite our best efforts, the nightmare persisted. The forest, once a sanctuary, became the battleground for a harrowing confrontation. It was a night that blurred the lines between reality and horror, leaving scars that ran deeper than the cuts and bruises inflicted by our assailants. In the aftermath, as dawn painted the sky with hues of pink and gold, we were left to pick up the pieces of our shattered peace. The forest, once a haven, now held the echoes of a night that defied reason. The trauma lingered, an indelible mark on the tapestry of our lives. The forest had become my refuge, a chaotic sanctuary veiled by the shadows of towering trees. I was on the run, a fugitive, my every step weighted by the fear of pursuit. My tent, hidden amidst the dense foliage, was a meager haven, but dwindling supplies pressed me deeper into the wilderness. As hunger gnawed at my stomach, desperation became my guide, leading me towards an unexpected encounter that would strip away the illusion of safety. One early morning, as I trekked through the underbrush, a plume of smoke twisted through the treetops. A distant cabin, nestled in the heart of the forest, beckoned like a mirage of salvation. A cautious optimism kindled within me, and I cautiously approached, hoping to find sustenance to prolong my desperate escape. The closer I ventured, the more details emerged: a rustic cabin, weathered by time, its chimney billowing the smoke that had lured me. My footsteps, muffled by fallen leaves, betrayed no sign of my arrival. As the cabin loomed before me, a strange sense of foreboding tightened its grip. Summoning a semblance of courage, I rapped gently on the door, the echo reverberating through the stillness of the forest. A shadow flickered behind the frosted glass, a silhouette, a silent observer of my intrusion. The door creaked open, revealing a man whose eyes bore into mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. His weathered face betrayed no emotion, a stoic mask that concealed a myriad of secrets. I stammered, concocting a tale of a lost hiker, hoping to divert suspicion. The man's gaze remained unwavering, a piercing scrutiny that saw through my feeble facade. Without uttering a word, he invited me inside, his gesture carrying an unspoken weight. The interior was dimly lit, the aroma of burning firewood mingling with the mustiness of aged timber. Unease festered as I observed my surroundings. An array of hunting trophies adorned the walls, the lifeless eyes of the taxidermy creatures reflecting the eerie ambience. My attempt to blend in faltered, every corner whispered of a sinister history, hidden behind the facade of rustic simplicity. The man, an enigma draped in worn flannel, broke the silence with a gravelly voice that echoed through the confined space. He spoke of the forest's tales, its ancient secrets entwined with the roots that anchored the cabin. An unsettling realization dawned: the man was no stranger to the shadows that clung to the wilderness. As conversation unfolded, a cold sweat traced my spine. His questions were veiled interrogations, probing into the recesses of my fabricated story. I felt like prey ensnared in the hunter's trap, the illusion of safety crumbling with each passing moment. Panic clawed in my chest as I wrestled with the decision to flee or feign camaraderie. The man's demeanor shifted, a subtle menace tainting the air. His eyes, once unreadable, harbored a darkness that mirrored the depths of the forest itself. Abruptly, he rose, beckoning me towards a door that led to the cabin's bowels. My heart thundered as I hesitated, the unknown awaiting me beyond that threshold. The room revealed a trove of horrors: shackles, chains, and tools that spoke of unspeakable acts committed in the name of a twisted solitude. The man's true nature unfurled before me, a predator hidden behind the guise of a recluse. The realization ignited a primal instinct, the fight-or-flight response that surged through my veins. Adrenaline propelled me towards the exit, my senses heightened to the looming threat. The forest, once a realm of escape, became a labyrinth fraught with peril. My breath synchronized with the rhythm of my pounding footsteps, the pursuit echoing through the dense thicket. Every branch that snapped beneath my feet reverberated with the urgency of survival. The canopy above, thick with interwoven branches, veiled the moonlight, casting in ominous darkness. The predator's steps echoed relentlessly, a haunting symphony of pursuit. My mind raced, mapping an escape route through the labyrinth of trees, the boundaries of safety ever elusive. As the forest swallowed my fleeting silhouette, the man's bellowed threats hung in the air. The underbrush became my ally, masking my movements as I weaved through the intricate dance of shadows. Panic and determination intermingled, the thin line between predator and prey blurring in the suffocating confines of the woods. Exhaustion threatened to betray me, my labored breath a symphony of vulnerability. A glimmer of moonlight guided me towards a clearing, a sanctuary bathed in silver luminescence. With every ounce of strength, I willed my legs forward, the rhythm of pursuit fading into the distance. As dawn painted the horizon with hues of pink and gold, I emerged from the confines of the forest, the line between escape and capture forever etched in the soil beneath my trembling feet. The man, obscured by the veil of trees, remained a haunting specter, a testament to the nightmares that lurk in the heart of the wilderness. The encounter left scars, both physical and psychological, that time could not erase. The forest, once a refuge, became a realm of horror, its depths concealing the chilling truths that unfolded beneath the canopy. The cabin, a facade of rustic tranquility, held the echoes of a nightmarish dance between predator and prey. I continued my desperate flight, haunted by the specter of pursuit that lingered in the recesses of my consciousness. The forest, once a symbol of escape, transformed into a maze of nightmares. We decided to escape the chaos of city life and booked a weekend getaway at a cabin nestled deep in the woods. The promise of tranquility and the scent of pine in the air seemed like the perfect antidote to our stress. The cabin, a rustic haven with creaking floorboards and a crackling fireplace, looked like it leaped out of a postcard. The first day was idyllic, exploring the nearby trails, the sun dappling through the dense canopy. As night fell, the woods came alive with mysterious sounds. We laughed it off, attributing it to the usual rustling of nocturnal creatures. Little did we know, the serenity of our escape would soon morph into a nightmare. On the second evening, after a cozy dinner by the fire, the atmosphere shifted. A knock on the cabin door shattered the silence, echoing through the wooden walls like a foreboding drumbeat. We exchanged puzzled glances. It was late, and unexpected visitors in the heart of the forest raised our anxiety. I cautiously opened the door to find two men standing on the porch, their faces obscured by the shadows. They were uninvited guests, their eyes hollow and expressions unreadable. My wife and I exchanged uneasy glances, our solitude shattered by their unannounced intrusion. The taller one spoke, his voice low and gruff. "Mind if we warm up a bit?" Lost our way in the woods. The situation felt off, but the biting cold and the darkness outside compelled us to invite them in. They settled by the fire, their presence casting an eerie gloom that flickered with each dance of the flames. Small talk ensued, but their questions became increasingly intrusive. They probed into our lives, our reasons for being there, and I could sense my wife's discomfort growing. My attempts to steer the conversation away from personal matters were met with unsettling silence. As the night wore on, the atmosphere thickened with tension. The shorter one, who hadn't spoken much, started eyeing our belongings, his gaze fixating on the antique clock on the mantelpiece and family photos adorning the walls. It felt like a violation, their intrusion creeping beyond the boundaries of politeness. My instinct screamed danger, but confronting them seemed unwise. I suggested they leave, fabricating an excuse about needing rest. The taller one chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine, and they reluctantly stood to leave. As they stepped back into the enveloping darkness, the finality of the door shutting behind them released a breath we didn't realize we'd been holding. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt tainted by their unsettling presence. The night passed in anxious vigilance, every creak of the floorboards outside heightening our fear. With dawn's tentative light, we ventured outside, half expecting to find traces of their visit. But the woods held no clues, as if the strange men had been phantoms conjured by our imagination. We cut short our weekend escape, the allure of the cabin replaced by an urgency to distance ourselves from the unsettling encounter. The drive back to the city felt like an escape from a horror movie, the shadows of those men lingering in the rearview mirror. Months later, the memory of that night still haunts our dreams. The woods, once a symbol of peace, became a repository of fear. It was just a peaceful weekend getaway with my son. We rented a cozy cabin in the woods to escape the chaos of everyday life. The trees stood tall and the air was crisp, creating a serene atmosphere around us. Little did we know that our peaceful retreat would spiral into a nightmare. As night fell, we settled in, the glow from the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. The silence of the woods outside was broken by a knock on the door. I opened it to find a grizzled man, a disgruntled hunter, accusing us of poaching on his territory. Confused, I assured him we were just here to relax, not to harm anyone. His eyes narrowed with suspicion, and he warned us to stay out of the woods. I tried to defuse the tension, but the hunter left, leaving an unsettling feeling in the air. As the night wore on, the woods outside the cabin seemed to come alive with strange sounds, rustlings that set my nerves on edge. The tapping on the windows began, a slow, deliberate rhythm that echoed through the cabin. My son and I exchanged uneasy glances, the fire now casting ominous shadows. The hunter's accusations had sparked something dark, and we could feel it closing in. Suddenly, the cabin plunged into darkness. The power had gone out, leaving us in pitch-black silence. I fumbled for a flashlight, my son clutching my arm. As the beam cut through the darkness, we saw the figure of the hunter lurking just outside the window, his face contorted with anger. He began to bang on the door, demanding we leave. Panic set in as his threats escalated, his voice growing more unhinged. We barricaded ourselves inside, the walls of the cabin seeming to close in. The hunter circled, a predator in the night, and our refuge had become a trap. Hours passed, the threats escalating into violence. The hunter began to hurl rocks at the windows, shattering the glass. Fear gripped us as we realized there was no escape. My son clung to me, tears in his eyes. I had to protect him, but the desperation in the hunter's actions was unnerving. As the night wore on, we heard footsteps on the roof. The hunter was above us, and the realization struck he was determined to get inside. We huddled in the corner, helpless and terrified. The cabin, once a sanctuary, became a prison, the walls echoing with the sounds of the hunter's rage. Finally, with a deafening crash, the roof gave way. The hunter descended, a crazed look in his eyes. We had no choice but to fight for our lives. The struggle was chaotic, the small cabin filled with the sounds of desperation and fear. It felt like an eternity, each moment dragging on as we grappled with the relentless assailant. When it was over, the hunter lay still on the cabin floor. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by our heavy breaths. The woods outside, once a source of tranquility, now felt like a foreboding presence. We were battered and bruised, the events of the night etched into our memories like a nightmare we couldn't escape. The authorities arrived, investigating the cabin turned crime scene. The hunter had crossed a line, driven by a darkness that had lurked within him. My family and I rented a cozy cabin nestled deep in the woods, a retreat from the noise of the city. Little did we know that our serene getaway would morph into a nightmare beyond our wildest fears. The cabin, surrounded by towering pines, felt like our private sanctuary. Days were spent hiking, fishing, and enjoying the simple pleasures of nature. However, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a subtle unease settled in the air. One night, after a day of laughter and marshmallow roasting, we settled in for a quiet evening. The atmosphere shifted when distant footsteps echoed through the trees. At first, we dismissed it as the rustling of nocturnal creatures. But as the sounds drew nearer, anxiety gnawed at our sense of security. Suddenly, the cabin door burst open. Masked figures, clad in dark clothing, stormed in with a brutality that shattered our tranquil escape. Panic set in as the intruders brandished weapons, their eyes void of mercy. We were hostages in our own temporary haven. Their gruff voices demanded compliance. Fear-stricken, we obeyed, herded into a corner while they ransacked the cabin. The leader, a towering figure with a cold gaze, seemed to take pleasure in our terror. They mistook our refuge for an ideal hideout, turning our vacation into a violent nightmare. We huddled together, desperate whispers exchanged in an attempt to formulate a plan. The criminals, oblivious to our strategizing, continued their search for who knows what. Tension thickened the air, every creak of the floorboards amplifying our vulnerability. As the night wore on, a glimmer of hope ignited. A cell phone, cleverly concealed beneath a cushion, offered a lifeline to the outside world. But seizing the opportunity required precision. One wrong move, and the consequences would be dire. My wife, nervously clutching the phone, dialed 911 while maintaining the facade of submission. The dispatcher's voice, a lifeline in the dark, reassured us that help was on the way. Yet, the criminals, growing suspicious, intensified their watchfulness. The minutes crawled by, each second amplifying the pounding in our chests. The dispatcher urged us to stay calm, guided us through the labyrinth of tension. We clung to the belief that law enforcement would arrive in time, but doubt clawed at our resolve. The criminals, realizing their plan had unraveled, grew desperate. Taunts turned to threats, and the air was charged with the volatile energy of impending violence. It was a standoff, a battle of wills between captors and captives, with the fate of our family hanging in the balance. Then, sirens pierced the night. The distant wail grew louder, a symphony of salvation. The criminals, cornered and outnumbered, lost their grip on power. The cabin, once a prison, transformed into a refuge as law enforcement stormed in, disarming the assailants. Relief washed over us as handcuffs clicked into place. The nightmare, a twisted reality that had infiltrated our peaceful retreat, crumbled. Yet, scars lingered, trauma etched into the wood and stone of that cabin in the woods. Our vacation, initially an escape, became a lesson in the fragility of security. As we packed our bags, leaving behind the echoes of that harrowing night. I ain't never been one for spooky tales or anything of the sort. I'm just a guy, you know? A carpenter, to be exact. Last summer, I took on a job to renovate this old cabin deep in the woods. The place had seen better days, all covered in moss and practically swallowed by the trees. But hey, work is work, and I needed the cash. So, there I am, swinging my hammer, pulling up floorboards, and doing the whole song and dance of fixing up this rustic cabin. All's going well, and I'm feeling like I'm earning an honest buck. That's until I get to this one wall in the back corner of the place. I'm tearing down the paneling, and something catches my eye, a glimpse of rusted metal. Figured it might be some old pipes or wiring. But as I pry away the wood, I see it. There, behind the wall, is a body. Cold and stiff, eyes staring into nothingness. I nearly drop my tools. Panic claws at my throat as I stumble back. My mind races, and I can feel the sweat breaking out on my forehead. This ain't right. I'm just here to fix up a cabin, not uncover some dark secret. The body, a guy by the looks of it, is wrapped up in an old tarp, like someone tried to hide him away. My hands are shaking as I reach for my phone to dial 911. But then, doubt creeps in. What if they think I did it? I'm knee-deep in someone else's mess, and I don't know how to swim. I decide to finish the job before the authorities come knocking. Maybe it's stupid, but I figure I can explain everything, show them I was just doing my job. So, I patch up the wall, trying to erase the image of that lifeless stare burned into my brain. But I knew I had to phone the police. When they arrived, I explained why I was there and what happened, and they took my statement. Later on, the cabin owner was arrested, and it turns out it was his brother who he killed in there. Still gives me the creeps thinking about it now. The woods, an inky tapestry of shadows, swallowed me whole as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and indigo. Disoriented, every step I took seemed to plunge me deeper into the labyrinth of towering trees. Panic clutched at my chest, the dissonant symphony of nocturnal creatures heightening my sense of vulnerability. My phone, bereft of signal, was a useless artifact in this natural abyss. In the distance, a feeble light flickered through the interwoven branches, a beacon in the heart of the wilderness. Struggling against the encroaching darkness, I stumbled towards it, driven by a desperate hope for salvation. The glow led me to the edge of a clearing, where an ancient cabin stood, its time-worn facade obscured by the dense foliage. Relief tinged with caution swept over me as I approached the cabin. The flickering light emanated from a single bulb dangling on the porch, casting elongated shadows that danced in tandem with the rustling leaves. Hesitation lingered in the air as I raised my knuckles to the door, my intention to seek directions or, if luck favored me, a ride into town. The door creaked open, revealing a man of advancing years, beard unkempt, eyes tinged with a weariness that spoke of solitude. He surveyed me with a piercing gaze, a scrutiny that felt invasive, as though he could unravel the layers of my existence with a mere glance. I stammered, stumbling through a request for directions. The man's response was a measured silence, broken only by the faint crackle of the wood-burning stove within. A moment passed like an eternity before he spoke, his voice gravelly, revealing no intention of assistance. His refusal to offer aid ignited a spark of frustration within me. I pressed further, my pleas for guidance escalating into a desperate plea for a ride. The man's countenance remained impassive, the flickering light casting eerie shadows on his face that accentuated the severity of his stoic demeanor. It was then that he extended an invitation, an offer wrapped in the veneer of hospitality. The sudden warmth in his eyes seemed incongruent with the austere exterior. Hesitant but drawn by the promise of shelter, I stepped inside the cabin, the door creaking shut behind me with an ominous finality. The interior exuded an antiquated charm or rustic decor that belied the disconcerting undercurrent. The man guided me towards a modest table, its surface marred by the etchings of time. A chair scraped against the creaky floorboards as I seated myself, the unsettling stillness amplifying the resonance of my own breath. Unease festered as the man, now the orchestrator of this macabre tableau, began recounting tales of the forest. His stories, woven with an eerie blend of truth and fiction, unfolded like a sinister tapestry. I felt a knot tightening within me, the realization dawning that the man harbored secrets concealed beneath the veneer of rusticity. As the conversation unraveled, the man's narratives delved into the unsettling, the legends of those who entered the woods but never emerged, the notion of a sentient wilderness that preyed upon the lost. His gaze, once inviting, became a window to a realm of malevolence that transcended the tales he spun. A chill gripped me as he stood, his shadow elongated on the cabin's wooden walls. The flickering bulb cast distorted patterns, transforming the rustic haven into an arena of uncertainty. My entreaties for an exit were met with a cold refusal. The man's demeanor, once enigmatic, now revealed a calculated malevolence. Suddenly, the veneer shattered, and the man's true nature emerged. His eyes gleamed with a predatory intensity, his voice a sinister symphony as he disclosed his insidious agenda. I was a pawn in a sadistic game, ensnared in the trap he had meticulously crafted. Panic surged as I realized escape was futile. The cabin, my sanctuary turned prison, concealed dangers beyond its creaky walls. The man's unsettling laughter echoed through the confined space, an ominous prelude to the nightmare that awaited me. With every step towards the door, dread clung to me like a suffocating shroud. The woods, once a labyrinth of uncertainty, now seemed a sanctuary compared to the horrors lurking within the cabin. As the door creaked open, revealing the impenetrable darkness beyond, the man's sinister silhouette whispered of the malevolence that awaited in the forest's embrace. The night unfolded as a haunting symphony, the cries of nocturnal creatures mingling with the rustle of leaves, the ambient hum of an untouched wilderness now transformed into a visceral backdrop to my plight. Each step through the underbrush became a desperate attempt to elude the grasp of the unseen malevolence that hunted me. I emerged from the forest's clutches, gasping for breath, my disheveled appearance a testament to the horrors endured. I hadn't been to Dad's cabin in years. The memories flooded back as I approached the familiar wooden structure nestled in the woods near the mountains. The place was a sanctuary of shared moments, laughter, and warmth, all echoes of a time when Dad and I would escape to the simplicity of nature. But Dad was gone now, and I was here for one last visit before selling the cabin. The air was thick with nostalgia as I entered, greeted by the familiar scent of aged wood and the faint hint of pine. The furniture wore the patina of time, each piece holding a silent story of our past. It was surreal, like stepping into a time capsule that had preserved the essence of our shared experiences. As the day waned, I lit a fire in the hearth, watching the flames dance and cast flickering shadows on the walls. The solitude weighed on me, the creaks of the cabin amplified in the stillness. I decided to take a stroll, perhaps rekindling memories of our hikes through the mountains. The moonlight cast an ethereal glow over the landscape as I ventured towards the familiar trail. The crunch of fallen leaves beneath my boots was a symphony of solitude. The woods whispered, but the whispers grew into distinct murmurs as I approached the base of the mountains. Curiosity propelled me forward. Was it just the wind playing tricks on my ears? Or was it something more? My pulse quickened as I moved cautiously towards the source of the sounds. The moon cast elongated shadows between the trees, distorting the familiar landscape into an eerie dreamscape. Rounding a bend, I stumbled upon a gathering of figures. Silhouetted against the moonlit clearing, they were an indistinct mass engaged in some obscure ritual. My heartbeat reverberated in my ears as I strained to discern their actions. They seemed to sense my intrusion, freezing in unison. My breath hitched. Uncomfortable tension hung in the air. These weren't friendly locals or lost hikers. Their eyes bore into mine, hostility palpable. An uneasy realization settled in, I wasn't welcome here. I took a step back, trying to convey a peaceful intent, but their response was anything but. Whispers turned to hushed murmurs, then to aggressive muttering. Fear gripped me as the group started advancing, a shadowy amalgamation fueled by some shared malice. Panic set in, and I turned to flee, my footfalls thundering in the silent night. They pursued, relentless, their figures merging with the darkness. My mind raced, conjuring nightmare scenarios of what might happen if they caught me. My father's cabin, once a haven, now felt like a trap closing in around me. The forest became a maze, the trees twisting and distorting in the moonlit darkness. Branches snagged at my clothes, and every rustle behind me sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled, a gasp escaping my lips, as the shadows grew closer. Desperation fueled my sprint back to the cabin. Adrenaline surged as I burst through the door, slamming it shut and barricading it with whatever furniture I could move. I listened, breathless, as their murmurs lingered outside, a sinister chorus of hostility. Hours passed like an eternity. I huddled in the darkness, my mind racing through memories of my father, the cabin, and the inescapable fear that now clung to those memories. With the first light of dawn, the forest fell silent again. As I cautiously emerged from the cabin, the clearing revealed no trace of the mysterious group. The mountains stood stoic, the same as they always had. Yet, the woods felt different, tainted by an encounter that defied logic. I left the cabin, no longer a sanctuary, but a relic of a time forever altered. The echoes of our shared laughter and warmth were drowned out by the unsettling whispers that lingered in the shadows. The sale sign now adorned the cabin, marking the end of a chapter tainted by an encounter that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. Working as a cop in a small town, you think you've seen it all. But one night, responding to a disturbance call at a cabin in the woods, I stumbled into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. The radio crackled with the dispatcher's voice, reporting a complaint about strange noises from a secluded cabin. I sighed, expecting some rowdy teenagers or maybe a bear rummaging through the trash. Little did I know, this call would etch itself into my nightmares. As I reached the cabin, an unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by the rustling leaves. The moon cast eerie shadows, and the cabin loomed like a dark secret hidden in the woods. My flashlight beam danced across the overgrown path, illuminating the peeling paint of the front door. A hesitant knock echoed through the quiet night. No response. Another knock, louder this time, and the door creaked open, revealing an abyss of darkness inside. My instinct screamed at me to retreat, but duty held me firm. I stepped into the unknown. The interior was suffused with an oppressive stillness. The only sound was the faint hum of a refrigerator. As I ventured further, a soft murmur reached my ears. A low, guttural voice, muttering indistinct words. The hair on my neck prickled as I strained to make out the words. Turning a corner, I faced a figure hunched over in the dim light. A man, his back to me, whispering to himself. I called out, identifying myself as a police officer. No response. His muttering continued, now more frenzied. Drawing closer, I saw the man clutched something, a tattered journal. His words became clearer, a disjointed string of fearsome threats and bizarre ramblings. I felt a chill creeping up my spine, the foreboding sense that I had intruded into something beyond my understanding. Attempting to disarm the situation, I asked about the disturbance. His gaze snapped to me, eyes wild and bloodshot. He was a stranger to sanity, lost in the labyrinth of his mind. I took a step back, my hand inching toward the holster, as the unease escalated. His focus shifted, fixating on me with a malevolence that sent a shiver through my core. A predatory grin stretched across his face, and he began to advance. Panic set in, the distance between us closed too quickly. I fumbled for the radio, calling for backup, but only static answered. The cabin's walls seemed to close in as I retreated, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the silence. I contemplated using my weapon, but fear froze my hand. The journal in his grip became a weapon, too, an extension of his madness. Cornered, I glimpsed the glint of a blade within the folds of his tattered clothes. Time slowed, the gravity of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Every nerve screamed at me to escape, but the room offered no exit. In that heartbeat, the cabin transformed into a labyrinth of fear. The man lunged, blade gleaming in the dim light. Instinct took over, and I dodged, the blade grazing my arm. Pain exploded, but adrenaline fueled my flight. Through the darkness, I stumbled back into the night, gasping for breath. The woods, once a backdrop of nature's serenity, now harbored the echo of a confrontation between sanity and madness. The man, the intruder in his own fractured reality, vanished into the shadows, leaving me wounded and haunted. The nightmare continued long after that night. Sleep brought restless dreams, the man's crazed laughter echoing in my ears. The woods, once a symbol of peace, became a spectral landscape of fear. The small town, once an oasis of familiarity, now harbored the unknown. We lived in a quiet community nestled in the woods, far from the chaos of the city. Life was simple, predictable, until that night. The sun dipped below the horizon, and an unsettling stillness settled over our small enclave. It started with distant echoes, gunshots that shattered the serene silence. My wife and I exchanged uneasy glances, the sound sending ripples of fear through our peaceful existence. We rushed to lock our doors, a ritual we had never needed until now. The air thickened with tension as more shots echoed through the woods. Panic spread among our neighbors, whispers of uncertainty flowing through the community like a dark undercurrent. I clutched my wife's hand, reassuring her with a forced calmness that even I didn't feel. Peering through the window, the moon cast an eerie glow on the trees, creating dancing shadows that seemed to whisper malevolence. Our community was supposed to be safe, insulated from the madness of the outside world, but that illusion crumbled with each echoing gunshot. Our community had never faced a threat like this, and the uncertainty fueled the fear. The distant pops drew closer, and a rising tide of collective dread filled the air. We huddled in our home, straining to hear any clue about what was happening. Then came the chilling realization: the gunshots weren't random. They were getting closer, methodically encroaching on our supposedly secure haven. The safety of our community shattered as the rhythm of the shots grew louder and more deliberate. Sirens wailed in the distance, the cacophony blending with the erratic symphony of gunfire. The darkness outside our windows became a canvas of fear, the shadows concealing an unknown threat that prowled our once tranquil woods. As the commotion reached a fever pitch, we heard frantic footsteps approaching our door. An urgent pounding echoed through the house. My heart raced as I cautiously opened the door, revealing a neighbor, wide-eyed and pale, gasping for breath. He spoke of a madman, armed and dangerous, wandering through our community with a chilling purpose. Panic set in as we realized the danger wasn't an external force, but an intruder among us, a wolf in our once safe sheepfold. Our community, once bound by a sense of security and familiarity, now fractured into a collective paranoia. We formed a shaky alliance, barricading doors and sharing nervous glances. The once tranquil woods transformed into a labyrinth of fear. The relentless footsteps of a madman echoed through the night. Each creak of the floor, every rustle of the leaves outside, became a potential harbinger of the impending threat. We whispered hurried plans, navigating the shadows with trepidation. As we moved through the community, the air grew thick with tension. Fear wasn't just an emotion, it became a palpable presence, clinging to us like a suffocating shroud. The madman's presence was felt but unseen, a ghost haunting our once secure haven. Then, in the eerie glow of a flickering street lamp, we saw him, a silhouette moving with malevolent intent. He wasn't a faceless intruder, he was a manifestation of our collective nightmare, a tangible embodiment of the chaos that had invaded our sanctuary. Chaos erupted as he spotted us. The chilling glint of his weapon reflected the moonlight, and a wave of terror crashed over us. Panic fueled our flight, each footfall echoing the desperate beats of our hearts. The once familiar paths became a maze of fear, a labyrinth with no apparent escape. We stumbled through the woods, branches clawing at us like unseen fingers of the night. The distant shouts of neighbors, the haunting laughter of the madman, it all melded into a disorienting symphony of horror. Our small community was no longer a haven, it was a nightmare unleashed. As we ran, the realization sank in, there was no sanctuary. The woods, once our refuge, had become a trap. The madman pursued with relentless determination, his laughter echoing through the trees, an ominous soundtrack to our desperate flight. Exhausted and breathless, we stumbled upon a clearing where we stayed until morning. When the police arrived, he was long gone, but the memory of that night is far from gone, even now, years later. My heart still pounds whenever I think about that weekend in the cabin. We were just a group of friends, you know? Decided to rent a cabin in the woods for a break from the city chaos. Found the place on Airbnb, cozy, isolated, everything we wanted. Little did we know what we were stepping into. The cabin looked just like in the pictures, rustic, surrounded by towering trees, and miles away from anyone else. The kind of place you'd dream about for a weekend getaway. We were excited, joking around, unpacking our stuff. It felt like the beginning of a perfect trip. Things got weird the first night. We were sitting around, playing cards and telling stories. That's when Sarah noticed it, a tiny red light blinking on the wall. We thought it was some gadget the owner left behind. We laughed it off. The whiskey might have helped in the laughter department. But the next day, things escalated. We found more of those blinking lights. Hidden cameras. In the living room, the bedrooms, even the bathroom. Everywhere. Panic set in. Someone had been watching us. Every move, every laugh, every whispered secret. That cozy cabin turned into a cage. Who the hell would do this? We combed the place, looking for more cameras. We found a few, unplugged them, but who knows how many were still hidden. Paranoia crept in. Trust shattered. The worst part? There was no escape. The nearest town was miles away. No cell service. We were isolated, and whoever was watching us knew it. We couldn't just pack up and leave. That was the nightmare, being watched, analyzed, and not knowing why. That night, we slept with one eye open. Every creak, every rustle outside the window sent shivers down our spines. We whispered in the dark, wondering if the person behind those cameras was watching us right at that moment. The last day, we decided to confront it. We left one camera in the living room, turned it towards the door, and waited. As night fell, anxiety consumed us. It felt like hours, but finally, we saw movement on the screen. The door slowly creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. We were being watched, but the watcher was too smart to reveal themselves. When we left that cabin, we left a part of ourselves behind. The sense of security, the feeling of being alone. It's been months, but the image of those cameras still haunts me. We never found out who invaded our privacy, who turned our getaway into a living nightmare. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I wonder if those cameras are still watching. If that person is still out there, seeing every moment of our lives. The cabin was our haven, a peaceful retreat nestled deep in the woods. It was just me and my wife, living a quiet life away from the chaos of the city. One chilly autumn evening, as the sun was going down, we heard a knock on the door. That knock would change everything. I opened the door to find a hiker, disheveled and shivering, claiming to be lost. He begged for shelter, said he had been wandering for hours. Compassion welled up, and we invited him in. He was a tall man, with sunken eyes that darted around nervously. Something about him felt off, but we dismissed it as exhaustion from being lost in the wilderness. We offered him a warm meal, and as he ate, he spoke vaguely about getting separated from his group. He avoided eye contact, spoke in fragments. My wife shot me a look. We both sensed something was wrong. After dinner, he insisted on staying the night, claiming the forest became treacherous after dark. Reluctantly, we agreed, offering him the couch. The night descended, and unease settled in. I couldn't shake the feeling that our quiet sanctuary had been invaded. We heard him pacing in the living room, muttering to himself. Curiosity turned to concern, and we decided to check on him. As we approached, he fell silent, staring at us with those vacant eyes. We offered him a blanket, and he accepted with a nod. But when my wife handed it to him, his fingers brushed hers in a lingering touch that sent a shiver down our spines. We exchanged a glance, the unspoken understanding that this man was not just a lost hiker. As we pretended to settle into our own bed, the night stretched into an eerie silence. Noises echoed through the cabin, footsteps that didn't belong to us. Anxiety crawled under our skin. I tiptoed to the living room, and there he was, standing in the dark, staring out the window. When I asked what he was doing, he muttered about shadows and vanished trails. The encounter escalated when we found him standing at our bedroom door, his breath heavy with an unsettling intensity. His eyes locked onto mine, and I knew we were in danger. We had to get him out. My wife, terrified but composed, told him we were calling for help, that he needed to leave. His demeanor shifted, aggression replacing the vacant stare. He mumbled about needing protection from the forest's secrets, his words a jumble of paranoia. We dialed the police, praying for their swift arrival. He paced, muttering curses, and the air thickened with a tension that left us gasping for breath. When the authorities arrived, they found no evidence of a lost group, no belongings suggesting a hiking expedition. The hiker vanished into the night, leaving us with a chilling uncertainty. The cabin, once a refuge, now held the scars of that night, a reminder that darkness can seep into even the most secluded corners of our lives. There's this cabin in the woods. Me and my best friend thought it'd be a good idea to rent it out for a weekend. You know, a break from the grind of life. Just two guys looking for a bit of peace. Little did we know, peace was the last thing waiting for us. We pulled up to the cabin, excited about the woodsy escape. But as we approached, something felt off. There, in the fresh snow, were footprints leading straight to the door. We exchanged uneasy glances. We were supposed to be alone out here. Opening the door, the warmth of the cabin couldn't shake the chill running down my spine. We unpacked, tried to shake off the feeling that we were being watched. The footprints outside didn't help. We tried to brush it off. Maybe someone got lost, right? Night fell fast, and we settled in with a couple of beers. Laughter echoed through the walls, but it never quite drowned out the feeling that we weren't alone. The unease hung in the air like a thick fog. Then, the knock came. Soft at first, almost lost in the wind, but it persisted. We exchanged glances, both wondering who the hell could be out there. I opened the door, and there he was, a tall man, looming in the doorway, his eyes locked on us. He looked lost, confused, but there was something off about him. His gaze, intense and aggressive, sent a shiver down my spine. I asked if he needed help, but he just mumbled incoherently. My best friend, always the bolder one, stepped forward, trying to make sense of it. That's when it got real. The guy snapped, eyes narrowing, and he lunged at us. Pure aggression. We stumbled back, crashing into the cabin's furniture. Fear gripped us, but adrenaline kicked in. We managed to push the guy out, slamming the door shut. Through the window, we watched him pace outside, muttering to himself. It wasn't just confusion, it was something darker. Something that made the woods feel like a trap, not an escape. The night dragged on. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind, set our nerves on edge. We took turns keeping watch, eyes glued to the window. It felt like hours, but eventually the pacing stopped. The man was gone. Morning came, but the woods felt different. We packed up, the sense of peace shattered. We reported the incident, but the authorities never found the man. He vanished into the trees, leaving us with the chilling reality that the woods we thought would bring serenity held something far more sinister. I bought this old property on the edge of town, a quaint place that felt like a fresh start for me and my two daughters. There was a cabin a bit further out on the land, and curiosity got the better of us. We decided to check it out, thinking it could be a charming retreat. The cabin stood there, weathered and silent, surrounded by the whispering woods. As we stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like memories lingering in the corners. We found an old diary on a dusty shelf, its pages yellowed with time. Opening it sent a shiver down my spine. The diary revealed the story of a family that lived here before us, and it was anything but charming. Tales of tragedy unfolded, like shadows in the moonlight. They faced hardships, loss, and an overwhelming sense of despair. The more I read, the more it felt like the cabin held echoes of their sorrow. As I read aloud to my daughters, the wind outside seemed to howl in harmony with the somber words on those pages. The family's pain seeped into our surroundings, transforming the cabin from a potential refuge into a chilling reminder of the past. The stories told of sleepless nights, of footsteps in the dark, and of faces seen in the shadows. Fear gripped us, and the once inviting cabin felt like a chamber of secrets. My daughters clung to me, their eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and fear. That night, as darkness swallowed the woods, we heard creaks and whispers, as if the very timbers of the cabin were haunted by the past. My daughters, normally full of laughter, fell silent, haunted by the tales from the diary. Sleep was elusive. Every rustle in the leaves, every creak of the floorboards, sent chills down my spine. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something. I questioned my decision to move here, to expose my daughters to this haunting history. Morning brought no relief. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows that danced on the cabin walls. We decided to leave, to abandon the cabin and its chilling secrets. But as we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the stories in that diary weren't just words on paper. They lingered in the air, in the very fabric of the woods that surrounded us. Weeks passed, but the memories of that cabin stuck with us. The new property became tainted by the weight of the past. The town, once welcoming, felt like it held secrets too. We tried to move on, but the specter of that tragic family followed us, a constant reminder that sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. The cabin, a place that should have been a haven, became a nightmare etched into the landscape of our new life. I lived in this quiet cabin, nestled in the woods, away from the hustle of the world. It was serene, with just the rustling leaves and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. Life was simple. until the new neighbor moved in. The cabin next door had been vacant for years, but one day, a stranger arrived. At first, it seemed harmless, just another person seeking solace in the woods. But something felt off. I caught glimpses of them watching from their porch, eyes lingering on my cabin. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off as paranoia. Days passed, and the feeling of being watched intensified. When I went for walks in the woods, I could sense their eyes following me. It became unnerving, this constant presence. I wondered if I was imagining things, but the unease settled in my gut like a lead weight. One evening, I decided to confront them. I knocked on their door, and when it creaked open, the stranger stared at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. They claimed innocence, said they were merely enjoying the view. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. That night, strange noises echoed from their cabin. Whispers, murmurs that seeped through the thin walls. I strained to decipher the words, but they remained elusive. Fear crept in, and I wondered what secrets were hidden next door. As days turned to weeks, I noticed subtle signs, footprints near my windows, the creak of their door when they thought I wasn't listening. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly on edge. I debated involving the authorities, but what could I say? My neighbor was watching me. One day, I found photographs scattered near my doorstep, images of me taken from the woods. My heart raced, and the feeling of violation overwhelmed me. They weren't just watching, they were documenting my every move. I confronted them again, anger boiling within, but they denied any wrongdoing. I decided to keep to myself, but the torment persisted. Late at night, shadows danced on my walls, and I could swear I heard their footsteps outside. The isolation of the woods turned from comforting to suffocating. I questioned my decision to live here, in this cabin that was no longer a sanctuary. One stormy night, as the wind howled through the trees, I heard a tapping on my window. A rhythmic sound that sent dread coursing through my veins. I approached cautiously, peering through the glass. There they were, standing in the rain, their eyes locked onto mine. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. They knew they had invaded my peace. Fear became a constant companion. I installed curtains, locked doors, but it offered little solace. The neighbor's gaze haunted me, an ever-present weight on my shoulders. I considered leaving, abandoning the cabin that once felt like home. One morning, I woke to find a letter slipped under my door. It contained detailed observations of my daily routines, my habits. The words were unsettling, as if they knew me intimately. Panic set in. How long had this been going on? Was I dealing with a stalker, a voyeur? I called the authorities, and they investigated. The neighbor insisted on their innocence, presenting an alibi that didn't quite add up. But without concrete evidence, they couldn't do much. The nightmare persisted. I decided to sell the cabin to escape this small community tainted by paranoia. As I packed my belongings, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the very woods held eyes that followed my every move. The neighbor, with their unsettling gaze, remained a specter in my memory. I rented this cabin, thinking it would be the perfect spot to finally write my novel. A quiet retreat in the woods, away from the distractions of daily life. It was supposed to be peaceful, but peace became a distant memory. The first few days were fine. I settled into the routine of writing, surrounded by the tranquility of the woods. Then, I found them, Polaroid photographs scattered around the cabin. Pictures of ordinary scenes, the kitchen, the living room. But as I flipped through them, I noticed subtle distortions. Ghostly figures in the background, faces that seemed to stare right through the camera. I dismissed it at first, thinking maybe the previous guests left them behind. But the figures in the photos seemed to follow me, always lurking just at the edge of the frame. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from cozy to chilling. Nights became unbearable. The creaks of the cabin echoed like distant whispers. I'd wake to the sound of footsteps, but when I investigated, there was no one. Just the looming shadows of the trees outside. I began questioning my sanity. One night, I decided to go through the photos again. As I examined them, the figures became more distinct, more malevolent. Faces twisted in anguish, hands reaching out from the darkness. I couldn't escape the feeling that they were trying to communicate something I couldn't comprehend. Sleep became elusive. Every creak, every rustle in the woods felt like a prelude to something sinister. The air in the cabin grew heavy, as if the walls themselves held the weight of the ghostly apparitions captured in those Polaroids. I questioned whether I should stay or flee. One day, as I typed away at my novel, I heard a soft whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the voice grew more distinct, echoing through the cabin. It spoke in fragmented sentences, words that hinted at a tragic tale. I strained to understand, to make sense of the ghostly narrative. I contacted the cabin owner, hoping for an explanation. They claimed no knowledge of the photographs or the strange occurrences. I felt a sense of abandonment, as if the cabin had turned from a refuge to a trap. The atmosphere became suffocating, an oppressive force that clung to the very walls. The voices escalated. I couldn't escape them. They seeped into my dreams, mingling with the nightmarish visions of the figures in the photographs. Each day felt like a descent into madness, a struggle to separate reality from the ghostly echoes that permeated the cabin. I decided to leave, cutting my 2-week retreat short. As I packed, the whispers intensified, as if the spirits were mourning my departure. The photographs, now etched with an otherworldly glow, seemed to pulsate with a malevolent energy. As I drove away from the cabin, a profound sense of relief washed over me. But the dread lingered, like the faint echoes of a nightmare that refuses to fade. The cozy cabin, once a haven for creativity, became a place forever tainted by the inexplicable and unsettling. The Polaroids, remnants of a spectral presence, would forever haunt my memories, casting a shadow over what was meant to be a simple writing retreat. I bought this cabin in the woods, thinking it would be my escape from the grief that lingered after my husband's passing. The quiet solitude seemed like the perfect balm for a wounded soul. Little did I know, the peace I sought would unravel into a nightmare. Clearing out the cabin became a cathartic process. I wanted a fresh start, away from the crowded memories of the town where we once lived. As I sifted through dusty old boxes and rusty furniture, I discovered letters and notes tucked away in hidden corners. The handwriting was elegant yet carried an air of secrecy. The letters revealed a correspondence between the previous occupants of the cabin and a mysterious figure with ominous intentions. Words hinted at dealings that were far from ordinary, cryptic exchanges veiled in metaphor and hidden meanings. My sense of escape turned into an unsettling realization that the cabin held a history I hadn't bargained for. The more I read, the more the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. It felt like the walls themselves harbored the whispers of those who had lived here before. Paranoia gripped me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the shadows held unseen eyes. The letters spoke of promises made and debts owed. Cryptic phrases hinted at a pact that went beyond the mundane. As I pieced together the narrative, a sense of dread settled in my gut. The mysterious figure in the letters seemed to be a malevolent force, a specter that loomed over the cabin. Late at night, the echoes of creaking floorboards and distant murmurs filled the cabin. Sleep became elusive, my dreams invaded by visions of the ominous figure from the letters. I questioned my decision to seek solace in this secluded retreat. One day, as I explored the woods surrounding the cabin, I stumbled upon an old burial ground hidden among the trees. The gravestones bore the names of the previous occupants, each etched with dates that hinted at tragedies. It was as if the cabin itself held a dark secret, a history of sorrow and despair. The more I delved into the letters, the more the malevolent force seemed to tighten its grip. It was as if the cabin's walls were closing in, suffocating me with the weight of the past. I felt like an intruder, a mere pawn in a story that transcended my understanding. One night, a storm rolled in, and the wind howled through the trees like the anguished cries of the past. The letters, now scattered across the cabin, seemed to dance with a life of their own. Shadows flickered, and I could swear I heard the distant whispers of the mysterious figure, urging me to leave. I decided to heed the warnings. Packing my belongings, I left the cabin behind, the weight of its history heavy on my shoulders. The sense of escape I sought turned into a desperate flight. As I drove away, the storm intensified, as if nature itself was mourning the departure of an unwilling participant in a dark tale. The cabin, once a refuge, became a haunting memory. The letters and notes, remnants of a correspondence that spoke of ominous intentions, echoed in my mind. I sought solace, but the woods held secrets that I couldn't fathom. The nightmare that unfolded in those quiet woods left me questioning the thin line between escape and entrapment, between solitude and the chilling presence of a history best left undisturbed. Back in the day, during summer camp, we were all hyped about staying in this cabin in the woods. You know, typical stuff: bonfires, marshmallow roasts, and stories by the campfire. Little did we know, it would turn into something straight out of a horror movie. The cabin was rustic, with creaky wooden floors and a musty smell that never quite left. We were a bunch of kids, excited for a week away from home. The camp leaders seemed normal at first, just adults in charge of a bunch of rowdy teens. But then things started to change. It was a warm summer night when the first sign of trouble appeared. We were sitting around the fire, telling scary stories, when one of the leaders, Mr. Harris, started acting strange. He'd been okay before, cracking jokes and all, but suddenly his eyes went cold. I noticed it, and so did a few others. Something had flipped in him. As the night went on, Mr. Harris became more erratic. He started muttering to himself, pacing around the cabin. It was like he was a different person, possessed by some kind of darkness. We kids were scared, not knowing what to do. The turning point came when he gathered us all in the common room. His eyes were wild, and he began talking about a twisted version of a camp tradition. He wanted us to participate in a game that involved venturing into the woods in the dead of night. None of us were up for it, but his insistence was unsettling. As we hesitated, Mr. Harris snapped. His demeanor shifted from odd to downright menacing. He accused us of disobedience, claiming we were disrespecting the camp. Fear clenched our chests as we realized we were trapped in the woods with a man who had lost his sanity. In the dim light of the cabin, the atmosphere grew tense. Mr. Harris began pacing again, muttering about something ominous. The other leaders were nowhere in sight. Panic set in as we realized we were alone with this unhinged man in the middle of nowhere. Then came the moment I can't forget. He locked the cabin door, trapping us inside. His eyes gleamed with a sinister intent. The air felt thick with menace. We were just kids, feeling the vulnerability of being far from home, surrounded by the looming darkness of the woods. The night unraveled into a nightmare. Mr. Harris insisted we play his twisted game. Some kids were in tears, others trying to reason with him. It was chaos. That was when one of the older campers, a guy named Jake, decided he had enough. He lunged at Mr. Harris, wrestling him to the ground. The struggle was intense, and in the chaos, some of us managed to escape through a window. We ran into the woods, not knowing where to go. The distant shouts and the sounds of the struggle echoed through the trees. It was like being in a horror movie, running blindly through the dark. Eventually, we stumbled upon another campsite, and they called the authorities. The police arrived, and Mr. Harris was subdued. They never told us the full story, just that he had some kind of breakdown. We were sent home early from camp, our summer adventure stained by the memory of that night. Years later, it still haunts me. The memory of Mr. Harris's eyes, filled with a darkness that I can't quite shake. That night in the cabin became a chilling chapter in our collective memories, a summer camp experience that none of us would ever forget. I was hiking, just trying to clear my head. The woods were thick, and the air had that earthy smell. I stumbled upon this old cabin, kinda hidden among the trees. At first, it seemed like a normal, abandoned place. But then, I heard it, the screaming. The screams were sharp, desperate. My gut twisted. I approached cautiously, like my instincts were screaming at me to turn back, but something compelled me forward. The door to the cabin was slightly ajar, and the screams got louder. I pushed the door open slowly, praying I wasn't making a colossal mistake. The inside was dim, and my eyes struggled to adjust. The screaming was piercing now, and my heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. There she was, tied to a chair. A woman, her face contorted in pain and fear. The room reeked of sweat and something metallic. The sight hit me like a sledgehammer. I froze, my mind trying to make sense of the nightmare in front of me. A guy stood there, facing away from me. He had this twisted grin on his face, and he was muttering things to himself. My stomach churned. I'd stumbled into something horrifying, something I wasn't prepared for. The woman's eyes locked onto mine. They were pleading, desperate. I felt a surge of adrenaline, and my instincts kicked in. I had to do something. I scanned the room for anything to use as a weapon, my hands shaking. I found an old pipe lying in the corner. It felt cold and heavy in my hands. I approached silently, my breath catching with every step. The guy was too absorbed in whatever sick game he was playing to notice me. As I raised the pipe, the woman's eyes widened with a mix of hope and fear. I swung it, hitting the guy square on the back. He crumpled to the floor, the grin wiped off his face. The screaming stopped, replaced by a tense silence. I rushed to untie the woman, my hands fumbling with the knots. She was sobbing, thanking me in broken whispers. We needed to get out of there, out of that nightmare cabin. As we stumbled into the daylight, the world outside seemed surreal. I dialed 911, my voice shaky as I tried to explain what had happened. The woman clung to me, her eyes haunted by the ordeal. I could still feel the weight of the pipe in my hands, the coldness of the cabin lingering in my memory. The police arrived, taking statements and securing the scene. They told me the guy had a history, that he'd done this before. I couldn't wrap my head around it, how someone could be so twisted, so capable of inflicting that kind of pain. I found out later that the woman had been missing for weeks. Her family thought they'd lost her forever. And here she was, a survivor of a nightmare I stumbled upon by chance. So, there I was, in this cabin in the woods, thinking it would be a peaceful retreat. I needed a break from the chaos of everyday life, you know? The cabin was quaint, with creaky floorboards and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Everything was fine at first. I spent my days exploring the woods, enjoying the solitude. But then, one evening, things took a turn. I heard footsteps outside the cabin. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, the rustling leaves playing tricks on me. But then the footsteps got closer, more deliberate. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. I wasn't alone. I strained to listen, and that's when I heard them, voices. Low, murmured conversations that sent shivers down my spine. Panic set in. I didn't know who these people were or what they wanted. I peeked through the curtains, and there they were, 3 men, standing just outside the cabin. They looked rough, unkempt. My mind raced, wondering if they were lost hikers or something more sinister. I considered calling out to them, asking if they needed help, but something in their demeanor kept me silent. The men started circling the cabin, like predators closing in on prey. I felt a chill in the air, the realization sinking in that I was in the middle of nowhere, with no one to turn to. I could hear their hushed conversations, snippets of words that made my skin crawl. As they circled closer, I noticed one of them peering through a crack in the window. Our eyes locked, and a shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't right. They weren't here for a friendly chat or directions. They were here with intentions I didn't want to comprehend. I frantically looked around for a way out, my mind racing through escape routes. The back door seemed like my best bet. I moved silently, trying not to make a sound. But the floorboards betrayed me, creaking under my weight. The voices outside hushed, and I held my breath. I made it to the back door, my hands fumbling with the lock. The men were getting closer, their shadows dancing on the walls. My heart pounded in my ears as I swung the door open, rushing into the cold night. I sprinted through the woods, not daring to look back. Fear fueled my steps, and every snap of a twig sent a jolt of terror through me. I didn't know if they were following, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. Hours later, I stumbled upon a road, and a passing car took me to the nearest town. I reported the incident to the authorities, but they never found those men. It haunted me, not knowing who they were or what they had planned for me in that isolated cabin. The experience changed me. The woods, once a place of solace, now held a darkness I couldn't shake. I couldn't forget the feeling of being watched, the menacing voices outside the cabin. It left me with a constant fear of the unknown, a reminder that danger could lurk in the most unsuspecting places. So, my uncle had this cabin out in the woods, and he lent it to me and my friends for the month. We thought it would be the ultimate getaway, you know? Just 5 of us, away from the city buzz, enjoying the serenity of nature. Little did we know what was waiting for us. The cabin was your typical rustic retreat, with a cozy fireplace and wooden furnishings. We settled in, excited for a month of bonding and relaxation. The first week was a blast, hiking, fishing, all the outdoor stuff. But then, things started to get weird. One evening, we returned to the cabin after a day of exploring. As we stepped inside, something felt off. It was subtle at first, like a weird energy in the air. We noticed small things, a chair moved slightly, a book out of place. We laughed it off, blaming each other for being forgetful. But as the days went by, the signs became more blatant. The belongings were rearranged, and it wasn't just random, it was purposeful. Someone had been inside our sanctuary, touching our stuff. We started questioning each other, wondering if one of us was messing with the rest. But the unease lingered. One night, we decided to set up a camera, thinking it was just a prank. Maybe one of us was trying to mess with the others. We played cards, joked around, trying to act natural. As we reviewed the footage the next day, the atmosphere in the room shifted. There it was, someone entering the cabin, moving around with a deliberate, almost creepy precision. Faces around the table went pale as we watched ourselves on screen, oblivious to the intruder in our temporary haven. The unease turned into full-blown fear. We decided to confront the issue head-on, convinced it was just a local messing with us. We notified the authorities and took turns staying up, trying to catch this intruder in the act. Nights were tense, the creaks of the cabin amplifying our paranoia. Then, one night, we heard it, footsteps approaching from outside. The tension was palpable. We grabbed whatever we could use as a weapon, ready to confront the invader. The door creaked open, and there he was, a man we didn't recognize, standing in the doorway like a phantom. He mumbled something about needing shelter, his eyes darting nervously. Fear surged through us as we realized this guy had been inside our sanctuary, rearranging our lives. The authorities took him away, but the damage was done. Our haven had been violated, and the peace we sought shattered. We learned that the man had been living in the woods, surviving on his own. He claimed he didn't mean harm, just sought refuge. But the violation lingered, the invasion of our privacy, the unsettling realization that a stranger had been among us, rearranging our lives while we slept. The rest of the month was a blur. The cabin, once a place of escape, now felt tainted. Every creak, every shadow, carried a weight of distrust. Our sanctuary had become a nightmare, and even as we left, the unease stuck with us. The woods, once a serene backdrop, now held secrets that made our skin crawl. The cabin, once a refuge, had transformed into a haunting memory. The violation of our personal space, the fear of the unknown, left a mark that time wouldn't easily erase. And as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that the woods held a darkness we hadn't anticipated.